I'm Andrea, a passionate DEI advocate and consultant on a mission. Join me in each episode as we celebrate diversity, ignite conversations, and craft workplaces and educational institutions where everyone thrives. This podcast is my commitment to making a meaningful impact on the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So are you ready? Let's get Diversifused. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Get Diversifuse podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Horton-Mericli, founder of Diversifuse DEI Consulting and a passionate DEI advocate and ally. This episode is all about navigating identity and overcoming adversity. My guest speaker today is Michael Gershe. Hit by a drunk driver that killed his mother and nearly himself as an infant, Michael went on to found the Magic of Life Foundation. Despite breaking almost all his bones in the car accident, he became a collegiate swimmer, stand-up comedian, which I cannot wait to speak to him about, college educator, author, professional speaker, and founder of a nonprofit organization. Michael has dedicated his life to trying to eliminate impaired driving so others don't experience the same pain as he and countless other families have gone through. The Magic of Life explores how he overcame tragedy. This book right here, this wonderful autobiography by Michael, explores how he overcame tragedy, grief, and depression throughout his life. Even though he lost his mother, he and his brother were raised by his father and Dolly, an incredible Jamaican woman who stepped to fill the mother's role. He created the program called Jewish Born, Jewish Raised, which is a unique diversity program about his life. So welcome, Michael, to the Get Diversifuse podcast. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me. That's a lot. That's all the time we have. Bye.
Bye. Yeah.
I can't follow that. But thank you very much for having me. This is very exciting. And I'm always happy and honored anytime I'm able to share my story and make a difference in society. Because I think if we're able to bring some humor into life and make a difference in someone's life, then we're doing something pretty special. And doing this on diversity is just another avenue of sharing a purpose.
I can't agree more. To me, laughter is great medicine, and diversity is the spice of life. So, as I mentioned a little bit in your bio, or in your intro, I talked about your bio, the Magic of Life, which as I confessed to you before we started, I'm still finishing, but I'm loving it, and I recommend it to all my listeners if you're looking for a great autobiography. It's very impactful and empowering. But with that, I know that I mentioned some of what happened when you were an infant, but can you share with us your journey from tragedy to triumph and how it has shaped your perspective on life? And tell us a little bit about your story as well, the listeners.
Very happy to. Yeah, it's an ongoing journey even at 53 years old, because I think we both know you don't overcome grief like that, right? It's a daily process. But my life changed when I was 8 weeks old, when my father was driving us home from Long Island. My brother, who was 3, was sleeping in the back seat, not wearing a seatbelt. My mom was next to my dad in the front middle seat, and I was next to my mom. We were less than a mile away from our house as our light turned green. My dad started to go through the intersection. A drunk driver plowed the intersection and T-boned the car. Of course, the impact was so great, it pushed our car into a telephone pole and split the car all the way up to the dashboard. So when the first responders arrived, this was around 11 o'clock at night, they found my dad, my mom, and my brother. They didn't find me. They didn't know I was in the car. 10, 15 minutes later, they found me sandwiched between the door and the dash of the car.
Wow.
And this is 1970 when they built cars to last, not like today where you fart on a smart car and it blows over for 3 or 4 miles. They built cars back then. So
yeah, they did.
We were all taken to the hospital in the same ambulance. My dad had to get stitches on his face when the windshield hit him. My brother didn't have a scratch on him. My mom was taken into surgery. And as you said in the opening, nearly every bone in my body was broken. My skull was completely fractured from one side of my head to the other. So the fact I'm 53 years old and talking to you is nothing short of a miracle, and it's a good day.
Yeah.
My injuries were so severe, I was life flighted to another hospital in New York, and I had to get blood transfusions to stay alive. And the doctors were telling my dad, "Well, your infant son is touch and go," and my mom was fighting for her life. And you take one of those, it's bad enough for one person to go through, right? My dad was doing both, and my mom died of her injuries the morning of the 20th, and she was only 28 years old. She was a school teacher, young mom, sister, daughter, friend to many. And for me, I had to be taken to the hospital for months afterwards to make sure I didn't have any brain damage. And I think I'm fine, but some of my friends would argue that point. So, but they're not here, so they can't testify to that. So it's just you and me. And reading my book, I'm fine. Well, halfway. The other half, you might change your opinion, but I think I'm okay.
Well, if it's the friends you talk about in the book, I can see why they
those
would.
people. Them. They're not here. But look, if you're, and I can't remember if you're a parent, but if you hold your baby in your arms, you know how precious they are. And they couldn't put me in a cast; they had put me on a special board until I started to heal. And you're all cartilage, and it was like, well, we don't no idea what's going to happen to them. And when I started to learn how to walk, talking about, I'll get into Dolly in a second, but she told my dad, no, he's ready. My dad thought I was going to fall apart because we just didn't know. And even when I had to go to speech therapy as a kid, we didn't know it was just normal childhood pains or any effects of the car crash. But to grow up and be a competitive swimmer and and be somewhat normal in life and to be here, is a miracle. And I kind of dedicated my life because I couldn't let my mom's death be for nothing. And I discovered that in high school when I joined an organization called SAD. Back then it was SAD against drunk driving. Now it's SAD against, I think, destructive decision making or something like that.
Oh,
it means a
I
whole
didn't know
lot.
that. Okay.
There's a lot of stuff. I can't remember all the acronyms. I know it's students for something.
I think students against, yeah. Oh, wow.
Destructive, I don't know, decisions maybe? I guess I should have done my homework before this.
I should have also actually.
And that put me on the path. And when I was in college, I realized I could be a speaker and just so forth. And been blessed to do that for almost 30 years. And if you make a difference in someone's life, as we talked about beforehand, you make you bring humor in and you make a difference. And I think you're doing something pretty special. And I couldn't let my mom's death be for nothing. And just staying up for her and to try to prevent it. In the last 12 years, I do a program, my Magic Life program, for DUI offenders here in Ohio. And I never thought I would ever speak in front of DUI offenders because I always thought
you'd be too upset.
Hey, someone like him, my mom, right? But it's been the most rewarding audience if I ever spoke in front of, because you can see them change in that time you're together. Not everyone, but you can see them change, and that light bulb goes off their eyes. Their body language. They come up, they buy a book, they hug you, give you a handshake, whatever it is, donate. I remember one time when one of the offenders donated $1,000 to the foundation, and that made me emotional. And I'm driving home almost in tears, not of sadness, but happiness, and the fact that how my story impacted him to want to help. And that's the power of our stories, of how your story can impact someone like that, mine. And I've been very blessed, and I don't take that for granted. With the woman Dolly, who came into our house, the Jamaican side, my grandmother put an ad in the newspaper around October of the same year, 1970. So
and when was the accident?
The accident was September 19th, 1970. So and the ad was for part-time help because my dad was working overseas. Back in 1970, you didn't see a lot of single fathers trying to raise a toddler and an infant back then.
It's true.
Right? And my grandparents were working, so they needed some help. Dolly, originally from Jamaica, was living in England at the time, one of the first policewomen in Scotland Yard, which made sense when I was growing up and I had to get punished.
Did she do it with a Scottish accent, though?
yeah, right. It didn't make it any better when that belt was hitting my butt. Okay, look, it did not do anything. Yeah. So Dolly was visiting her sister in New York for 3 months. Her sister was a nurse,
Mhm.
and she goes, well, she saw the ad, and she goes, well, while I'm here for 3 months, my sister's working, I can make some money. It's only part time.
Mhm.
Answered the ad, didn't show up for the first interview. She said she couldn't find a ride. I say she just blew it off and ignored it.
Well, she was on vacation. I mean,
Right.
so.
Yeah. Uh, and this is where fate brings people together. Fate brought us together, and so a few weeks goes by, she saw the ad again, and we called and tried to play it off as a first time caller, but my grandmother remembered her accent. This time, she came to the house. Yeah, came to the house in Spring Valley, which is like an hour or so away from Brooklyn. It was a rainy
Oh.
day. Dolly was drenched, and my grandmother made her tea, and it was like a milky white type of thing, which Dolly almost cried because in England, English know how to make tea.
Yes, they do.
So they bonded because Dolly said, "Let me make a real cup of tea." So they kind of bonded over that. And then my grandmother was desperate for help. No one wanted the job. It was supposed to be Monday through Friday at her house. Make sure me and my brother are taken care of, the meals and that all that stuff. Then on the weekends, she can go back into the city, stay with her sister. And my grandmother was desperate. And she goes, "Do you want to meet Michael?" So they came up to my room. Dolly put her fingers inside the crib, and I latched on to him, and I smiled, which, only being a few months old, I don't know how, I know teeth. And she said, "This is where I need to be." She goes, "This is where I need to be. This family needs me more right now than going back to Scotland Yard or back to Jamaica eventually to be a nurse." And during the interview, my dad and my brother came home from the bank, brother being 3 years old. Dolly said she would do it, thinking it's part-time. And my grandmother told Jeff, goes, "Hey, Jeff, this is Dolly. She's going to be looking after you and your brother." My brother looks at my dad and says, "Hey, Dad, we're big men. We don't need any help. She's here for the baby, right?" Because 3 years old. And what was supposed to be a part-time job turned into a lifetime.
Oh,
It was,
I love that picture.
yeah, this was in 2019. This picture was taken then when we did the unveiling of my dad and my aunt's headstones in New York. And then as a family, we all went to see Tootsie, and this was afterwards.
The
And
movie Tootsie or on Broadway?
yeah, the play Tootsie, yeah, but
Ah,
it became a Broadway play,
oh,
fantastic play, and
nice,
oh yeah, it's a little bit better,
nice.
and still sitting on our lap apparently.
Yeah, but say you still want to be cuddled.
Right, but now she's 92.
Wow,
And
she looks
she
great.
raised me and my brother. Yeah, she raised me and my brother as her own flesh and blood. It wasn't about color, creed, religion. It was about basic human need. And when her visa was up, she's already part of our family. My grandfather, sponsored her to stay or kidnapped her. Not too sure which one. And even though she threatened many times to leave the family, but she was the family. And so, I have that program, Jewish born, Jamaican raised, because I have a white Jewish family and a black Jamaican family, but in one way, it's just family. And to me, it was normal because at first, she would stay in my room. And she said I would look at her in the crib and play, hide and go seek and stuff. My brother had a harder transition because he was already 3.
He already had that
He remembered
bond.
a little bit, and would say, "You're not the boss of me," and stuff, until my Dolly had to have a come to Jesus moment with my dad, sort of speak and say, "Look, I got to make the rules if this is going to work."
Mhm.
And he finally adjusted Dolly. The time that she remembers that it was his bedtime, and she was on the phone, and she said, "Jeff, your grandmother will put you to bed." And he said, "No, I want you to do it." And he sat down by her feet until she was
Oh.
done talking on the phone. Now, if you ever talk on the phone with Dolly, it could go on forever, especially if she's talking about tennis. So
Oh
that could
yeah,
have been.
you
I
did
don't think
say
he was
it.
put. Yeah, I don't think he was put to bed till he was like 19 years old. After that, so long time on that floor, uh, and that was his adjustment. And she instilled with us values and morals along with my dad. And my dad, was obviously a changed man. He lost my mom. And,
Mhm.
you don't regain that. Even though him and Dolly eventually formed a relationship,
Yeah.
Went from New York, moved to South Florida when I was in 1975. And over time, it just kind of developed. And you take a horrible situation of losing her mom, and
Mm.
something beautiful came in with her, and we got lucky.
Mm.
And maybe lucky isn't even strong enough of a
Blessed.
word.
Mm.
Yeah, blessed. Um, because again, here was this remarkable woman, and maybe, look, we were 1970 was still 6 years away from civil rights movement. But in this
Yeah,
country,
68
you come from a
from
different country like
MLK.
Jamaica,
Hmm.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
But you come from a different country like Jamaica or England, where it
Hmm.
wasn't like here. We all have different environments, different lives, and that impacts our
Yeah.
lives. And even in Scotland Yard, she worked with juveniles and kids, so she always had this passion for infants and stuff. Even now, at 92, she still loves babies and all those things. And God bless her, all that crying, I couldn't take it. Um, but but here is a remarkable woman, and when I started writing the book, she goes, "Don't use my name." And I went, "Do I still?"
You used your picture, you used your name.
Yeah, right. Oh no, and it was because she didn't think what she did deserves the attention,
Oh.
and I said, "That's why I have to write about it, because it's special."
Mm.
Um, because and I know in our situations, not every kid who loses a parent due to drunk driving or any type of tragedy gets someone like Dolly. No, I know there's step parents and adopted parents, but man, I think we won the lottery with this woman, because she just infectious, and even the people she met who grew up as swimmers, those people have fond memories of her. And but it was normal for me. You have a black woman and three white men, boys, right? Was it our guard? Was it is Dolly your maid? Is it housekeeper?
Yeah.
It's those type of titles that went because people didn't know what to
Yeah,
call
they just
her in
assume.
the 1970s, 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1970s,
Hmm.
80s. Then you got to explain it. And back then it was like governess, guardian type
Yeah.
of thing.
Au pair.
Never made legal.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Hmm.
never made legal, but in all purposes, she was our mom, right? But we never called her mom. It was always Dolly, and I don't know where that came from, or which is fine. It would be weird, to call her that, because mom, and even for me, the word mom has no emotion to it. There's no the love, because look, I
Hmm.
never had a chance to run home from school and say, "Hey mom, let's for dinner," or "Hey mom,
Yeah.
I love," and because a drunk driver took that away.
Mm.
And I know how I have one mom that gave me birth, or life, and Dolly gave me a life, my dad. So Mother's Day, you have that the high and the low. You realize, man, I wish my
Mm.
mom was here. At the same time, I have this woman, Dolly, who's my mom,
Yeah.
and every day I know how lucky I am to have her. So I
Mm.
wouldn't be me and my brother wouldn't be the people we are today if it wasn't for her. It was just my dad raising us, because
Yeah,
the
he was
grief and the
going probably through depression and everything. He wasn't
yeah, never
mentally and
recovered.
emotionally there to raise the kids
Mhm.
right afterwards.
Yeah,
So,
and she was our
yeah.
foundation in the rock. She made sure we were fed and clothed. Took us clothes shopping, and we had to try on everything. And it was just. But she discipline taught us how to stand up for ourselves. Along with my dad. So, but yeah, it was a remarkable childhood, and then you carry on those values through life. And I know I have a very different life when it comes to diversity and racism and and
Mhm.
all that stuff, because I grew up in a different way,
Yeah.
and you see it in a different view pair of glasses, so to speak.
Hmm. Yeah. You even individuals who have two different parents from two different races. Yours is a different situation from theirs. It's a little similar, but different because, as you said,
Mhm.
they never made it official, and it didn't start out that way.
Right.
And color was never an issue, which is beautiful to me. I love that it was all about human centeredness and human needs and all, which is what it should be about
Mhm.
every day. So, how did being raised by Dolly in a white Jewish household influence your sense of identity and belonging?
Well, that's a deep question. Even though you gave it to me
Yeah.
earlier, I still don't know because you live it. And I think, I think it's just being raised, and I think having a patience with everyone, and everyone has a different story, different background, and being part of it. And I think when you are discriminated against, you know how it feels, and
Hmm.
you don't want other people to feel that same way.
Yeah.
Look, I have a joke where I said, look, I don't. I have a white Jewish family and a black Jamaican family, so I wasn't taught to hate people based on color or creed or religion. I was taught to hate people because they're stupid, right? You know, and that's the joke because I don't care color, creed, nationality. If you're an idiot in life, then you're an idiot in life. It has
Hmm.
nothing to do with your,
Yeah.
skin color, religion, any of that type of stuff. It's based on personality and actions. So I
Yes.
think
Actions speak
seeing
louder than
that
words.
and being raised that way, first being Jewish, because I knew, growing up, not so much the anti-Semitism until I got to college, but I still
Hmm.
remember going to services and having, police there and the safety, and you wonder, why, and then you have,
Hmm.
the history of the Jews and so forth, and then
Hmm.
you add, okay, now here's a black woman, and then 70s and 80s, still what goes on,
Yeah.
and it affects you because you see all sides of it, right? And even in college, where I left Miami, Florida for Ashland University, which is a small town in Ohio. So it was the first time I saw like Amish people and Mennonite people, and it was culture shock
Uh,
for me. I was going to college with people who graduated with 12 people in their high school. I
yeah.
graduated with 600, 700 people. My class president is now the Supreme Court Justice,
What?
Ketanji Brown.
What?
Yeah, Jeff
No
Bezos went to my
way.
so Jeff Bezos went to my high school. So this is what we have in terms of
Like,
graduates, right? The top three: Bezos, the judge, and me. That's it. That's all we have. Um,
wow.
I'm third. I will take third place for the graduates. I will sacrifice for them. But yeah, it's until I got to college, and people come from different environments, small towns, farming areas where they weren't exposed to such diversity. And you hear the N
Yeah.
word for the first, the time, and it's being used like the color blue. It's
Hmm.
just it's
Everyday
just
language.
there. And
Yeah.
and 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 yes, I'm very much offended because you say that, that's Dolly, right? That's my family you're talking about.
Hmm.
My swim coach, I from racist, yeah, Semitism. When my dad dropped me off, we had dinner, and he apologized. He said, "My wife can't be here because her boss is Jewish and wouldn't let her out of work
Oh,
early."
making
And
it
I'm sitting
what
there,
he thought was a
and I have my
joke.
tie on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't even
Hmm.
funny. He didn't even
No.
know I was Jewish. He just said that, and it's like
Mhm.
this is common talk.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you kidding me? Because that's not what I've been exposed to.
Yeah.
And it went on when he would even use the N word and ask me, how come Jews don't believe in Jesus? And, all this stuff. And,
Wow.
when it was tough because my identity was all of it: Jewish, black, those type of things.
Hmm.
And you see it in a different way. And then when it hits you like that, no one else can experience it the same way as you because
Yeah.
you grew up, especially college, 18 years in one environment. And if that's all you know, that's all you know until you're
Hmm.
exposed to something else. And
It's
and
true.
it's hard to blame them in a way, but also you go, that's not right. It was 88. We should be ahead of that time.
Television and
24,
radio and mhm.
2024, we should still be ahead of that language and time. Sadly, we're not. And
Mhm.
we still learn that on a yearly basis in terms of where we are as a culture. I think we're sometimes getting better, like mental health. We're getting
Mhm.
better, but man, we're not there yet. And I think
Yeah.
it's until you're exposed to a certain culture or situation, then you have a better understanding. But if that's all you know, small white midtown, farm town,
Mhm.
that's all you know.
Yeah.
And then going backwards from a large city like Miami to Ashland, it was like, well, this is a whole different world, for me. But
Yeah.
worldly, and I'm coming to a town where it didn't have a Burger King, a couple of lights in it, and you realize how different you are from others.
Yeah.
And it's
That's
like, well,
true.
and it's hard because when you're picked on and bullied, and you're dealing with anti-Semitism. You have no DEI office in 1988. You have
No.
no to go to like there is
Mhm.
now in college. So you either so back then it was you tuck it inside, you make jokes, to humor as a defense
Mhm.
mechanism. Um, one of the things was, Ashland would serve bagels and ham. I went, you can't do that. Ham doesn't belong on a bagel, which is a Jewish food. You know, yeah, I remember going to a teammate's house before a meet in Slippery Rock, and the mom gave me a little pamphlet about why Christians love Jews. And you laugh it off because
Interesting.
everyone's looking at you, but inside, I was angry. But you
Yeah.
can't show that anger because then you feed into sometimes those stereotypes, even
Hmm.
though comedy is based on stereotypes. And and it's our jobs as comedians to point out those things. Now it's a little bit tougher, but I think we still can, and I know I do sometimes by combining Jewish and Jamaican stuff together. But yeah, and I think if you show that anger, then you kind of go, well, see, that's how all Jewish people are, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I couldn't let them win that battle. So humor was a huge part, but on the inside, very much angry, because you're isolated and you don't know what to do. And then you get scared and it's like, well, do you fight back? And then you fight back, then you get in trouble. So humor was a good way, but that identity, with Dolly and my dad, the patience and knowing that you are because this might sound bad, that you are a better person in a way because of those experiences.
Yeah.
And I think that helped in terms of how I was raised.
Yeah. Oh, I think it definitely helped. I mean, um, because you're even though you didn't move abroad anywhere, you were exposed to different cultures and individuals and religions too. Because from what you
Yeah.
said, Dolly is a Christian, and so you celebrated both Hanukkah and Christmas, which is wonderful. You got both
Yeah.
experiences.
Look, you ever see Jews trying to put together a fake Christmas tree? It's quite entertaining. It's the lights were very cool. Look, you have them in Norway, you fire for 8 days, but the Christmas lights they blink, they do cool stuff,
Yeah.
right? The candy canes were good, were tasty, and you get
Did you
more
do the
gifts.
popcorn string popcorn?
Gifts. Yeah, how to give. You have Christmas gifts. It's a win-win for everyone.
Especially as a
Although you kind of
kid.
go Santa Claus, really? Come on, people, come on, Santa. I mean, but
But going back
no,
to what were talking about with the situation in the restaurant with your father and I think it was your coach, I think.
yeah, from
Um,
Coach, yeah,
and it's very important to know who's in the room for
yeah,
everybody. And since it's impossible, virtually impossible to know people's identities just by looking at them, just assume, that everyone is in the room. And so word choice and word selection and actions are very important. So it's important to stop and think before you speak. Is this something I would tell if you're a Christian or a Jewish faith or Buddhist, my religious leader? Is this something I would say to them? If it's not, then don't say it. Is it something I would say in front of my grandmother or grandpa? If you have a very loving grandparent, um, then don't say it because you never know who's in the room, and you can unintentionally hurt somebody or intentionally, you never know, or
right.
hurt somebody, and with your words and actions. And if you're young or even older, you can burn bridges without even knowing it
Mhm.
because people will remember that. Um,
Right.
they
Yeah.
remember emotions, they remember how you made them feel. And like with Jeff, so you graduated with Jeff Bezos, and which justice was it again? I can't remember.
Ketanji Brown, the newest
Ketanji
Supreme
Brown,
Court judge.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was like, oh my gosh. So, and Ketanji Brown, it's like, if they were bullied by anybody in high school, they remember that.
Right.
They remember those names, they remember those faces because they remember how that those individuals made them feel.
Yeah, I don't know
And
if good time was because she was our class president. She was pretty
oh,
popular.
probably, but I know, but I was just an
Yeah,
example.
but maybe she
You
was.
never
Maybe
know.
other Dells think. But even with the swim coach, you think about that. That, and we both know people say that stuff. It's not an isolated case. It's just like, oh, it's been, he said it before. So because it's a repeat
Yeah,
behavior, and then they think
yeah,
it's okay. And
yeah.
and that's a huge issue because
It is a
it is
big deal.
behavior. It's
Mhm. It's learned
my
behavior.
college roommate came from Tennessee. He hung up a rebel flag, but he grew up
Mhm.
on Hee Haw and Dukes of Hazzard, and in that culture. That's
Mhm.
all he knew until he
Yeah.
learned differently. And
Yeah.
so,
Mhm.
but you have to, and we both know this. You have to be willing to learn. You can unlearn. Everybody hates a learned behavior. We
Mhm.
can learn to undo that
Yeah.
behavior, right? It's not
Exactly.
hereditary. It's a learned thing because you don't come out of the womb hating certain groups, whatever. That's learned, and it's
Yeah.
modeling behavior, and
Mhm.
so you can learn to undo that if you choose to.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing stories about reformed members of the KKK or those type of things because they
Yeah. Or
learn
the skinheads
but
or
that can be done, right?
mhm.
Because it's like a
Mhm.
cult,
Mhm.
very
Yeah,
much.
it is.
But in college, I remember being called, Jesus killer and, those things. And it's like you're
Mhm.
18, 19. You go, what do you do? My dad's not
Yeah.
here, Dolly's not. But again, it goes back to what they instilled in me. Goes
Mhm.
back to and that one thing, and you hide all that pain inside. And I would swim angry because anger,
Yeah.
was a good outlet for that. I'm gonna be angry at those people. My coach, God, Harvey Dennison, who killed my mom. I was even
Mhm.
angry at my dad for never really talking about my mom, not realizing he couldn't.
Yeah, it was too
He couldn't
painful.
avoid the emotions, and
Yeah.
it took me 47 years to kind of do it. Even though I did my
Mhm.
program, I never really process my mom's death until he passed and my aunt passed 90 days apart in
Mhm.
2018, and I
Wow.
ended up with counseling. You didn't get to that part of the book yet, so I
No,
just
not
ruined
yet.
it.
Yeah. Wow.
Um, uh, but I ended up with grief counseling because there was a week where I'm not going to see the end of the week, and it's not like I didn't want to die. I wanted the pain to
Mhm.
stop, and what
Yeah.
stopped me was my friends because we went through loss. We lost Big John, who you read about. He was a drunk
Oh.
driver and he passed away. So I saw what his death did to us. And
Yeah.
I also sent my brother, Dolly, other family members back to the cemetery 3 times within 6 months. Uh,
Wow.
you know, and
That's
my
a
grief
lot of
counselor said,
loss.
yeah, and she said, you thought about the other people who would be asking all those questions.
Yeah.
And with my family going through so much grief and loss, starting with my mom, grandmother when I was 8 or 9, my grandfather when I was 23, 24,
Mhm.
those add up. And it was like, how much
Yeah.
more pain can you give someone? And when Dolly read the book, um, it
This
was,
book?
yeah,
Okay.
that one. And she would ask me, are you okay? And, every time we spoke, how you doing? Those, because no one knew.
Yeah.
Because I was a kid, I went through every age going through grief, you know,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't think that, but every school form, mother's name deceased, and you're different. You're not like that family has a white
Yeah.
mom and dad and stuff,
Yeah.
right? I remember in Hebrew school, um, Don would pick us up, and I was there. My brother already left; he was already bar mitzvahed. And the way it happened was we would stay by the doors, and the cars would drive, do a circle, and come back and
Oh,
pick us up.
okay.
And we're waiting there as with other members of my class. And as the car's coming, one of them said, "Hey, I didn't know your mom was," and he said the N word. And I
And
turned
this was in
around, and
Miami.
I almost yeah, this was in
Yeah.
Miami, and I almost pushed him through one of the stained glass windows.
Ooh.
And I remember Dolly seeing that. She asked what happened, and I couldn't I couldn't say it because again, I didn't want to say the N word in front of her because I know it's
Mhm.
offensive and those. I was so emotionally charged. I was like
Mhm.
12 years old. You got to deal with that as a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's a hard situation when you're exposed to that and you know the meaning of it, and you know, and I think it comes down to love and respect. Those type of things. because you don't want. And I know if I told her, she would have stopped the car and probably took off the kid's belt.
Like, oh no, he didn't. Yeah.
And then yeah, right, because she would defend me and always would, because I'm her son.
Yeah, you're her baby.
Yeah, so it's those type of cases that goes back to you asked the first question in terms of perspective and identity. You don't forget those type of things because you see them on both ends, right?
Yeah.
You do it, you see it onto her, and you see those experiences to me, and you know how it feels, and it feels crappy.
Yeah, it does,
and it's hard. Yeah, and
because people, stereotype and just see one thing and make it a negative thing. But as you were talking, it's important for people to realize that there's so many things that you can't see that don't come up onto the surface. There's so many things that many people don't let others know how they're feeling, whether it's depression, anxiety, being offended. There's a lot of things that people hold in because they're afraid of repercussions, or as you had said, what being that stereotype, and so they hold things in, and just like one of your comedian, one of the comedians you I wouldn't say looked up to, but loved, Robin Williams, he suffered from depression, and you wouldn't know it because he was so funny and always showed up and did work and was a great father and husband, but you don't know everything that people don't know everything that someone has inside of them. So, and there's a lot of hidden things. And in some of my previous episodes, we talked about intersectionality, which is all the different identities that one person identifies as. So you're a man, you're a Jewish man, you're a Jewish man who had one, I wouldn't say a one parent household, but who came from a mixed family. You're a Jewish man who had I wouldn't say disabilities. I don't know. Would you say who suffered trauma, PTSD, right. Trauma, yep. And I mean, and the list can go on, and that's just 5 right there. But looking at you, I see a white man, and but there's so many more.
I'm whiter than usual too. Yeah, yeah. Very white. Yeah.
So as you said, you don't want to be seen in a Speedo these days, right? In your book.
And that light doesn't help in terms of how white I am. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, humans are so complex, and we have to realize that. We have to realize that before we act. Like, never assume the worst, never make assumptions, because you don't know what that person's going through, what that person has been through.
I think as I got older and I started doing my stuff and identify, I was 47 before I started to process my mom's death. And the first question the grief counselor said was, and she was a friend of mine, and she goes, "Let's talk about your mom's death and how that impacted all your relationships." And I was like, "I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about my dad and my aunt." She's like, "No, you're not." And so she knew what to dive in, and it's been researched. Counselors and patients, it takes 12 to 15 visits to get comfortable. And but because I knew her for so many years, man, she hit those points right away, and she wasn't budging. And she was right, because that depression and the grief, I said, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get better. And because I was the problem. I needed to be, sort of, fixed. And I started doing research on trauma, the PTSD.
PTSD.
I was told, right? But that trauma was stored inside of me. Infants, I had to be picked up in a pillow. I didn't have that mother
Yeah.
touch after, 8 weeks, even though
Hmm.
dad or die, but it wasn't that mother-son
Yeah.
bond. Wasn't
Yeah.
that same thing, and that carries on. Our
It
parents'
does.
trauma trickles down to us. So not only did mine, I had my dad's. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, my father, I emulated what he did. He stored it all inside until it almost killed me.
Yeah.
And great. And then now I have no problem. And as you see, you'll find out in the book, talking about emotion and depression, because now instead of it controlling me, you flip the tables. And I read a
Yes.
lot of Brene Brown's books and
Yeah.
vulnerability and shame. I was like, I have no shame talking about depression and grief and it's such a relief not to be afraid of it. And I especially think for men, because society goes, you got to
Yeah.
be tough and all that stuff. Asking
Hmm.
for help is probably the strongest thing I ever had to do, because it's life and death at that point in time. And talking about Dolly, and I couldn't do it to her, my brother,
Hmm.
that family, and because it's enough. And my father never talking about it, and you emulate that. It's like, okay, can't talk about my dad's death, so much, or my aunt, 90 days later. They were 10 years apart in life, but 90 days apart in death.
Wow.
So you're really grieving for your dad, and then my dad had Parkinson's, so it was part of that, and my aunt had ovarian cancer.
Yeah.
So, you had, and my dad, even around his eulogy, I said he was the strongest person I knew because he carried around that mental grief and trauma
Yeah.
for 47 years. And then he had the physical aspect of Parkinson's, and he would play the piano. He started a kazoo band at the assisted living facility.
No
He
way,
wanted
a
to go on
kazoo
tour.
band?
Yeah, he wanted to go on tour. I was like, yeah, that's what America needs, Dad.
I would have gone. Those are fun little
Yeah,
instruments.
right. But it showed me how strong he was because he didn't let the Parkinson's affect that side of his life.
That's
And
awesome.
even my mom's death still impacted him because I remember one year, it was 2012, and he had like a couple hospital stays, and he got really close with infections and so forth. And December 19th, 2012, he wrote me and my brother an email stating that would have been their 48th wedding anniversary. And he said, even to that day, he was still too hard to talk about my mom.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, because men in 19, men back then didn't talk about those things, and he didn't
Yeah.
know how. I mean, it was courage, and he did whatever it took to raise me and my brother. But I go back to thank God we had Dolly, because I don't know how we
Hmm.
would have turned out if it wasn't for this amazing woman.
Yeah.
Um, because he was obviously a different person. I remember hearing stories about him at the memorial service, and I went, God, I didn't know that guy. And that's what's sad about
Yeah.
not knowing my dad, that person before. And
Hmm.
then we know tragedy, grief is going to change someone, and you may
Hmm.
never recover, you may never come
Hmm.
back. But I think, and it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be depressed. That's human nature. We just can't stay like
Hmm.
that. I knew back when my aunt and my dad passed away, and I lost my sense of humor a little bit. And my friend was taking pictures of me at our first fundraiser, and she goes, I can't use these pictures because you have sad eyes." And my friend Ray, photographer but also a
Hmm.
counselor, he went, "All right, your friends, the people you are connected with, know you." And I did my second TED talk about saved by our connections, and talk about my mom as my first connection saved my life, because I think she did something in that split second in that car to
I,
save my life,
I think she did. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Dolly saved my life. My friends who saved my life. My dad. So I think it's really cool to look at our connections and how they impact our lives. And
Hmm.
now I really forget where I'm going with this story, but
Well, I'm enjoying it. I digress all the
I don't know what
time
the
in
hell I'm
my
talking
podcast, so don't
about,
worry
but good.
about
I'm
it.
glad you are. Um, I don't even know anymore because I went off, but I think it was about I don't even know.
Well, actually,
But
I'll stem off from so what you were saying about uh, most men mainly not knowing how to
yes,
handle their emotions in that time reminded me of can't even believe I forgot this. My dad also lost his mother, but he was 8 years old. And my grandfather, his dad was in the military. So he was a drill sergeant. And so he didn't have someone as wonderful and beautiful as Dolly come in. So he was raised by his drill sergeant father. And it was him and his older sisters were raised by my grandfather, who didn't know how to raise kids. He was doing his best, and he never spoke about their mother. He lost ties with her side of the family, and all, and it took its toll. It did. And it's with tempers and emotions and more so tempers and emotions on the men's side, the male side, and with my aunts, the self-confidence, self-esteem, self-worth. They couldn't wait to get out of the house. So yeah, that's the flip side of how it, one of the ways it could have gone if Dolly never entered into y'all's lives. So it's
we would have stayed
blessed.
Yeah, we would have stayed in New York. I would have been a Jets fan instead of a Dolphins fan. It would have been horrible.
Oh my gosh!
We're talking about the bigger stuff here, football, right? Look, I couldn't imagine being a Jets fan if we stayed in New York.
Hey listeners, Andrea here. This is the end of part 1 of this episode. Stay tuned for part 2 of Get Diversifuse episode 11, From Tragedy to Triumph, Navigating Identity and Overcoming Adversity, with guest speaker Michael Gershe. Both parts of the episode were launched at the same time, so feel free to continue on to part 2 of this exciting conversation between Michael and me. Part 2 should be the next episode on my podcast channel. Thanks for listening, and remember, stay diversifused. Now go out there and make a difference. And as always, for more strategies on building inclusive workplaces and communities, check out Diversifuse. We're here to guide you on your DEI journey. Make sure to visit our website at diversifuse.com and follow us on social media for the latest happenings, blog posts, tips, and events.